Hey everybody, this is Chris Bobay and Frieda Bobay with Bitcoin Sports Network. We have some really exciting guests with us today. We're so happy that you decided to spend some time listening to our podcast and this great interview. We have a couple of professional golfers with us today. Really excited to introduce Pernilla Lindberg and Daniel Taylor, a fantastic professional couple that has been making waves in Bitcoin on the PGA Tour and adopting many other people. You guys are great. I'm sure you have a lot of good conversations, and we're excited to learn about you guys and learn about your orange pill story.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us, guys.
Yeah, so let's get right into it. So how long have you guys been in Bitcoin? What intrigued you about it? What do you guys see for it in the future?
I guess I'll probably leave the conversation to Daniel pretty quickly, but it actually kind of goes back to me, and it was actually one of my best friends on tour, an Australian player. Must have been close to 10 years ago. She bought 1 Bitcoin for her husband for his birthday, and she had just heard of Bitcoin through her brother-in-law back in Australia, and then I'm sure he told us back then. We didn't think much more about it. And then you and one of my good friend's husband, you and him got talking, late 2019 or something like that, maybe?
Yeah, into COVID was really, probably for a lot of people, have a lot more time to figure out things and understand it. But it didn't, I don't know, we've got quite a few Australian friends, and we find that Australians are pretty switched on with Bitcoin and some other things, but a lot of them understand Bitcoin. So Pernilla's good friend Sarah and her husband Dwayne, I think some of their family had already been in Bitcoin before, and that's kind of how it got.
We got talking about it more and more.
Talking about it, and how she ended up buying him a Bitcoin at $600, and just stashed away forever. But yeah, during COVID we got talking. I don't even remember the actual significant, the actual conversation where it came up. But during COVID, we would meet up with them literally every weekend and go to a bakery that we like just down the road here in Florida, and we'd just sit down and talk for hours. So because we had nothing to do, the golf tour had just been put on hold for 3 or 4 months, so there was no tournaments. A lot of the golf courses wouldn't even allow you to play for a stretch of time, so we had endless amounts of time. And that's kind of when I really sort of started to ask more questions, and then took the learning path back home and started digging in. And then it's pretty much been like that ever since.
I've seen the hours put in ever since. I usually kind of joke and say that I feel like you've spent more hours than most people probably spent on their university degree or PhD.
Was there anything in particular that really connected with you? Was it more finance, more inflation, more stock market, or what about Bitcoin connected with you?
Well, it's a little bit more like the investing finance side to start with, because being athletes in general, younger athletes, they can make good money in their 20s, but then once you get into your 30s, 40s, it's you're never going to make the same money you made in your 20s if you're an athlete. I mean, that's the peak years are in your 20s. So that money, by the time you reach any sort of retirement age, is going to be worthless over an extra 20, 30 years. So we've always had to really invest any money that we made on the golf course, because we need to do something with it. Otherwise we might as well have not made it. So we had it. My family has had a lot of things in real estate. My dad kind of got me into that when I was younger, and we did own some properties. But over time, you start to see the rents can't go up anymore to make the numbers make sense anymore. All the expenses and the property, especially here in Florida, the property taxes and insurance, they keep rising, and there's just a max limit to how high rent can go, and you just feel horrible raising rent all the time. So we just completely got out of all real estate because it just didn't want to have anything to do with it. And that was really the part about Bitcoin. It's like there's only so many things you can do with your money, and it seems like more and more doors are getting closed, or they just seemed irrational places to put capital. And then the perfect time we had all this time during COVID. I mean, there's always positives from some bad situations, and it really was. We had the time to dig in and learn about it, and especially during the time when we're both actually, playing golf and having a chance to make a living from it.
And then for me, I probably just slowly over time. It probably took you a while to get me there too, but just kind of seeing all the time you put in, and obviously I kind of heard all these podcasts in the background, and I kind of just eventually kind of got there too.
Yeah.
And not to disclose like any details on holdings or investments or whatever on this podcast, but Pernilla, for you, what was like the click moment where you're like, well, because I mean, there's hundreds and thousands of shitcoins out there, let's face it, and we hear all about these cryptocurrencies. Even some of us have a technical background, we're just like bombarded with this information. So how did you finally make the fine line in between like Bitcoin and Bitcoin only versus either the shitcoins, or have you, I guess?
Well, just before she answers that, I will caveat that I did own some Ethereum at the beginning, and I got rid of it all in 2021.
So, and I think it was probably around then that you really taught me, because I mean, that didn't matter what I listened to, if it was on TV or you read, and people were talking about crypto, and Daniel just ingrained in me, he's like, it's Bitcoin that we're interested in, not crypto in general. And like that kind of got ingrained in my mind. So then
not the same thing.
No. So then as soon as I, just had conversations with people, and they would say, oh, we hear that you're into crypto and all these different coins. I was like, no, it's Bitcoin. Like I felt like I had to kind of correct people. So I don't know if I remember the specific moment, but you ingrained that pretty good in me.
Yeah.
Was there an aha moment for you, or was it just death by a thousand cuts, basically, of learning and hearing about it, and then it just became part of you?
Yes, very much so. I think it was just kind of hearing about it constantly. So I didn't have, I mean, the cool kind of aha moment, I would say, but just slowly over time, understanding it better and better. I asked Daniel kind of early on, okay, tell me a couple of books I should read. And I tried to get into them. I was like, I can't. But then, over time, I've just gotten a better and better understanding.
Well, let's take a little bit of a change of direction in this conversation, because I'm also really kind of interested to hear, you guys are both from Europe, from different countries, found each other through golf. Can you talk, it being Valentine's Day and everything, can you talk a little bit about your beginnings as a couple and what brought you guys together and how you guys met?
Yeah. So I grew up in Sweden. Daniel grew up in England, but we actually both came to the US on golf scholarships. We didn't know each other at the time. I went to school in Oklahoma. He went to school in Louisiana, about similar times. And then it was right after school that I turned professional, and I was in Europe playing the qualifying event for the ladies European tour, and Daniel was there caddying for another player, and we actually met in the gym in the south of Spain that week and got talking, and then we actually got paired in the same group the last round, so got to talk some more, and then we stayed in touch. That was December of 2009, and then stayed in touch that winter, and as soon as kind of the next season started, 2010, we started to hang out more and more during events, and about 6 months later we started dating we were in Slovakia the week we actually started dating, so it's kind of and we had our first date in Australia, so quite an international story. And then some of my friends, particularly friends that are not golfers, they said, oh, that's fantastic that your boyfriend is a caddy, then he can work for you. And I said, no chance, that's never going to happen, that's going to be way too much time together. And yeah, then a couple of years later, I realized that I played very good every time he caddied for me. So I said, okay, let's do this full time. And 2012, you started to caddy for me full time.
Yep.
And then we did that for many years. And you've caddied, out of my 15 years as a professional, you probably caddied full time at least 10 or 11 of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
how did that first time, how was it when you offered him a job for that first time? How was it awkward? Was it kind of just it fell into conversation, or
It wasn't. It didn't really have that. It wasn't really like that. It was more. You want to come
Daniel
and
needed a job. I need a job.
I had a job actually, but it was more like, do you want to come and hang out in Slovakia for the week? Do me a favor. It was more.
Yeah,
it was an excuse to spend time together more than employ me, please.
Yeah, and then I know my parents were there watching that tournament, and they didn't say anything at the time. And then, a month or so later, I told my mom, I was like, yeah, I've started dating this guy from England. She's like, I knew it. I saw the two of you together on the course in Slovakia. I'm your mom. I saw that was more than just a player-caddy relationship.
Very cool. And then how is it? I mean, like, you've been going on for years and years and years now, working as a couple. We get this question a lot. We run Bitcoin Sports Network as a couple, and sometimes people take a second take. They're like, do we want to work with a couple?
Yeah, where's the drama going to come from?
Yeah, so did you guys experience any of that? Were there any hurdles where you're like, oh, I can't do this anymore? Or just talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, there was plenty of. Golf's pretty. Golf to an outsider, it seems pretty calm and relaxed. You're outside amongst the trees, but yeah, professional golf's a little different. You're spending each tournament. Your expenses are at your own expense. You're paying between $3,000 and $5,000 every week just to be there. You're paying for your caddy, you're paying for a hotel, car, flights, and food. So. And if you play badly the first 2 days, which is usually a Thursday and a Friday, then your week is over. You get nothing. You change your flight, you go home, but changing your flight costs more money as well, and you get nothing, and you just lost $4,000 just playing golf for fun, basically. Yeah. So it can be stressful when it doesn't go well. You can do that there's plenty of times when players have done that for months in a row and just throwing money out the window. So there have been times where the stretches like that have been tough, and you kind of have to sort of encourage each other. But we're pretty good at, the course is one thing over here, and then we have like a transition period, like an hour after we finish the round, where we're going inside and have some food or something, and then we go back to being husband and wife. And it's worked out pretty well. There's quite a few couples actually on tour over the years. So there's a couple where it hasn't worked out and they're no longer together, but maybe that would have happened anyway. But there's a lot that actually do work together, and they work together pretty well. And then really on the women's tour, compared to the men's tour, so the men's tour is mainly, or the PGA Tour is mainly in the US. So the players' wives and husbands and children and everyone, they can come out on tour. It's quite easy. It's just everything's pretty close and compact. The schedule is like mainly North America, but the women's tour is all over the place. It's a lot more events. So people play 30 weeks a year instead of 20 weeks a year on the men's, and the events are half in the US, half in Europe and Asia. So the tour is spread out a lot more. So if I didn't caddy for Pernilla, I wouldn't have seen her the last 15 years, which might have been even worse than all the arguments we ever had. So
we've been so fortunate. We've really gotten to travel the world together for the last 15 years. But yeah, I think the biggest thing is just being able to take that time after we finish on the golf course each and every day. And if it's 30 minutes to an hour that, we don't talk to each other, or just go kind of and do our separate thing for a little bit, to then kind of be able to come back as wife and husband. I think that's kind of been the biggest thing. Obviously, if I have always thought that there are way more positives than negatives, otherwise we wouldn't have done it for as many years as we did.
I'm interested to know about you guys working together. I know you were meant to be asking us the questions, but since we all work with our partner, I'd love to hear. It's been. We saw you in El Salvador. You seem to handle everything. There was a few stressful situations at the start, maybe, but you seem to work great together.
Yeah, no, we love it. This is not our first rodeo. We've been together quite some time. We're actually celebrating. Oh my gosh, no, I gotta know the years. we're celebrating 20 years this year of being married. Yeah. And so, along that path, you definitely get to know one another, and especially growing up together. So we know our strengths and we know our weaknesses. And, I think when you're younger, you sometimes try to look better to the world and point out each other's weaknesses, and that never gets anybody anywhere, right? And so I think over the last couple of years, especially, like, we've just really found out what are we good at, what do we love doing, and having the luxury to explore in that, and finding the Bitcoin community really lets us explore that, so it's really cool. But yeah, I wanted to say, seeing you guys at the Max and Stacy Invitational in El Salvador, we got to kind of see you as a couple. It wasn't a pro golf tournament for you by any stretch. Obviously, everybody wanted the orange jacket, but you guys were just hanging out, and then the request came in of, oh, can we actually like play on the same team? And we were like, oh, that's interesting. Like, actually, one quality time together on the golf course as well as the pool. And we saw you guys at the pool and stuff hanging out. And you just seemed like very relaxed and very, just having a good time. So I hope you guys come back next year. We just announced the Max and Stacy Invitational.
In combination.
Yeah.
The other day when we was just looking at the dates.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to touch on is kind of trying to relate golf and Bitcoin together, is the support group and mechanism that every successful professional that I've ever talked to has, is always talking so highly of. And you really notice the difference between those that survive and have long careers and those that are kind of, fast burning lights that ultimately burn out quick. And their support group is such a big part of that. Just like in Bitcoin, when the market, does a big dip, and all of a sudden you have to reach out to your friends and say, what are we doing here? How do we keep this together? And you always have to have somebody who's another Bitcoin friend or partner that can kind of talk you off that ledge from time to time, that keep you focused on what you're trying to accomplish. How have you guys developed your support group, and how has that helped you grow as a person, as a professional, and other ventures that you take on in your life?
So I guess I can kind of start talking about my golf support team, and I've been fortunate where the Swedish Golf Federation has supported us Swedish professionals very good ever since golf actually became an Olympic sport. So 2016 was the first time that golf was in the Olympics, and I got to represent Sweden in Rio. But they announced that in 2011, and the Swedish Federation decided to put more funding into supporting the professionals, because before that it was kind of, you were an amateur and you played on the Swedish national team, and then as soon as you turned pro, they kind of cut you off and you were on your own. But then they figured at that point it was the professionals they were going to get to send to the Olympics, so they started to support us a lot more on tour, and that really was helpful. So I worked with my swing coach from Sweden, mental coach, putting coach, physio, all of them from Sweden. They would come over, quite a few times a year, and they all for sure helped me get to where I got to in my career. And but then also, obviously, having Daniel there, he's kind of been the biggest support for me since it's been side by side my whole career. And that's. Being on the road, I think it's probably the case for, not just professional athletes, but businessmen or anything that's traveling. It can get really lonely, but especially in golf, because it's an individual sport. And if you don't have some friends out there on tour, the travel can kind of wear down on you very quickly. So I for sure developed some of my closest friends are other players on tour. And, it's a balance that we can all handle. We know that we're competitors on the golf course, but we're still there cheering each other on each and every week as well. And then kind of, I guess, over to you and what? Okay. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, players, they have people that are at home, maybe they golf coach or sports psychologist and family, and sometimes physio, but caddies usually get the brunt of everything, because all the pressure situations are when you're at tournaments or when you're in action, and the caddy is literally the only person that you're with most of the time when you're at tournaments. Coaches usually come sometimes, I mean, very rarely if you can, for, most players wouldn't have a coach at a tournament, but they come on a Monday and they leave on a Wednesday, and then the tournament starts on a Thursday. So it's literally player and caddy. So it's all down to, the caddy kind of ends up being a support in all kinds of different roles. You think caddy, you just carry a bag and help pick the right club and figure out the wind, but caddies usually end up being psychologist and, advisor and all kinds of other roles that come up during a tournament. Yeah. So
I will ask you. So you kind of brought up like the mental game, right? When I first was introduced to golf or actual people golfing is when I met Chris, because he's always been a golfer as long as I know. And I did not understand the mental game until, he made me come out on a golf course with him, and, you got to hold it like this and blah, 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 and all these little things. And I by no means, I should not be playing 18 holes, but I go to the driving range once in a while. But the mental game of that, so you said you actually have like a mental coach. And then obviously I do see this, when we watch golf on television, that the caddy is just like, I just sometimes just want to put a mic on the caddy, because they whisper in the player's ear something, and then all of a sudden this glorious shot appears, But how does that work for you? Like the mental game, is that something where like every day you do something for it, or is it as it comes up, or what does that look like a mental golf coach?
Yeah, first of all, I think the microphone on the caddy would make for a lot more interesting TV coverage if we always had that.
Yeah, it'd have to be a lot of editing.
But no, when I was younger, I always said that I felt like my mental game was something that came like kind of natural to me. I'm a very positive person. I always felt like being in the present and just focusing on things that's in your control, all those things came kind of natural to me. So I was like, no, I don't need a mental coach. I don't need a mental coach. And then when I came out on tour, I kind of realized how my nerves were getting in my way the first few events I played. So I started to talk to a mental coach back in Sweden. And, it was more of just a conversation whenever I felt like it was needed, but I would always take away like 2 or 3 kind of keys from every conversation that we had. I would write them in the back of my yardage book so I could kind of take them out, look at them. And it was, whatever we would discuss the last few tournaments, what I had struggled with. And then we would discuss like, okay, if that situation would come up again, how would I handle it different? So I worked with him for many years, then switched over, worked with a different guy that approached things a little bit different. And sometimes I could go months without talking to them, and other times I felt like I needed it once a week. So it's very different. Usually when you play good golf, that's when things feel easy, and then all of a sudden if things doesn't feel as easy, your head is spinning a lot quicker, and that's when I use different techniques when I'm out on the golf course when it comes to breathing and trying to, where I'm kind of my posture, where I'm focusing, where I'm looking, keeping my head up, and the tempo that I do everything in. I mean, there's so many different things that affects kind of the state of mind out there. And then if anything, I probably I took a meditation course, I should say, when I was in Australia, beginning of 2020. And then that was right before the world kind of shut down. So I had time to get into my meditation while I was home that year. And I really enjoyed it, but then kind of got out of it again. But I still have taken a lot with me, especially I would say from breathing and being able to calm my whole system down.
Yeah, here's an interesting question I got for you on that, because you were saying that the caddy kind of becomes not necessarily your best friend. You didn't say that, but somebody that you speak to regularly. And I can see how if it was a player caddy situation where you weren't related or you weren't dating or married, in this case, you didn't have to go. You went to one hotel room, they went to the other hotel room. In times of difficulty, you can kind of decompress from each other overnight and kind of come back to your even playing field. You need to focus for the next day. But Daniel, talk to us about how, as a as a husband caddy, when you see Pernilla starting to get into certain golf swing changes on the course, or you notice her carrying herself a little bit differently, how do you navigate those kind of on course, in the moment situations to help bring her back to focus?
Yeah, that's probably the trickiest part, because I've worked for Pernilla mainly, but I've worked for other players too. And when you're talking to your wife or husband, you sort of say things without as much of a filter as when you're speaking to other people. You're more honest, and perhaps you don't say things in the right way that's constructive when your wife's under a pressure situation. She wants to hear something a little softer versus the cold hard truth. So
that's probably when we've gotten into the most arguments on the course. With, I was like, I know you wouldn't have said that to someone else if you caddied for them, and I mean, it goes both ways.
So those are the main things that are the trickiest when you're caddying, when you're working for your wife, or if the other way around. So, but I mean, yeah, you're always kind of used to it by now. Yeah, I guess he's just gonna. And you don't think as much when you're caddying for your wife. You just say what you're thinking. It's that's what a good relationship is. Almost, you communicate what you're thinking and feeling. But on the golf course, that's the worst thing you do, to caddy for your wife. You should do the exact opposite. You should think, what am I going to say here? Should I say it a better way? Yeah, I probably should.
But I think also that's something I said. There are for sure more pros than cons with you caddying for me, and that's just one of those things that I've kind of gotten to learn, that I was like, okay, he just means the best and he wants the best for me. I know the delivery might not always be the best, but okay, try to remember that.
Yeah. It's definitely something that we can relate with, because early on in this business, when you're organizing these events for hundreds of people, you have all these different personalities, all these different wants and demands. And, I want certain things out of an event. Frieda wants certain things out of an event. And then everybody who's attending wants something out of the event. So trying to match all those things together. And one of the things that I think that has made our working relationship work is, early on, we basically sat down and we said, okay, we have to create some sort of on-off switch for being in the business and working in the business and staying professional. So whenever we're talking to each other about business, we always kind of try to have an idea of, okay, like business conference room. So keep it very neutral, keep it very respectful. Of course, there are some cracks in that idea from time to time, depending on the conversation. And then also, trying to make the relationship not just about work, and figuring out a time like, okay, at this time every day we turn it off. Like, because otherwise then work just becomes overly all consuming, and then you're not a partnership anymore. You're just a working relationship. And so, so totally understand that.
Yeah, our kids know now that when the kids are home after school, there's no more work, and they both are very aware. So they're like, somebody's on the computer, they're like, there's no working hours right now. They actually love it. So
that's good.
Yeah.
Keep you on schedule.
That's right.
Exactly. All right. So bringing it back to Bitcoin here. So as you're walking around the locker room at these events or in the clubhouse, has there been any situations where you hear just some other group talking about Bitcoin, and like, do you hear anything about it? Is it usually you bringing it up? How is the world being perceived on tour right now from finances? Like, what are you guys talking about on tour?
Well, yeah, on tours, it's hard to really figure out what the most common thing is with, like, what people are thinking. Like, it's typical on the women's tour and the men's, I think, for the finance side is almost completely forgotten about. It's almost like playing professional sport.
Yeah.
At least when you're younger, you just can't do that. You can't like think what you're going to do with your money. You just have to like play. And most younger players, they don't even see their money. It just goes into a bank account, and they don't ever think, what should I do with it, or how much they're just playing because they love playing, and the money is just accumulating in a bank account somewhere, and usually it's left to some third party to throw into some 60-40 portfolio or ETFs. So Bitcoin would never naturally come up unless someone's inquisitive. But it's been, asking people and speaking to people, it's very sporadic who's interested. There's some people we would never have thought would understand it or have some. Like one of the people who he's Australian too. He's a caddy. He's been on tour for 30 years. You know, he's been around for a long time, and he ends up sitting in the middle seat next to me on a plane, a red-eye flight in Asia 2-3 years ago. And of course, I can't sleep on planes, so I just end up talking or watching something. So I started talking to him, and he said that he'd bought a Bitcoin for all of his nieces and nephews. And that was the first thing I'd ever discussed with him about anything to do with, finance or anything. And then on the other hand, other people just have no idea. It's usually they own some random coin. Might be a couple of different of the younger caddies, but there's not that many. There's probably, other than the people that I've had influence on, outside of that, there's about 3 or 4 people that I've come across on tour that have mainly caddies because they're a little bit more, they have a bit more time and less focused on just golf. But yeah, there's only 3 or 4 other people other than those that we've come across that understand Bitcoin even the slightest or own some. So,
and I would say I can only think of really one player who approached me last year and said, "Okay, tell me some books that I should read." She's a very smart girl. We always usually chat about health and nutrition, and we knew we kind of have that in common. I usually give her some book recommendations or podcast recommendations, and we share a lot of ideas. So yeah, she was probably the first and only player that has kind of come up to me. It's like, okay, I'm interested. I want to learn. And yeah, but besides that, I think players are so single-minded when they are in the prime of their career. It's golf and maybe a little bit of gym and then recovery, and that's about it. So, and unfortunately, I mean, who knows, maybe on the PGA Tour, the guys, maybe a few more. But I mean, as we kind of know, in general, the women tend to be maybe a little bit less interested in the investing and finance and Bitcoin side. So that probably is kind of the case for why there have been a few more caddies that we have had the conversations with. And I know you wore a Bitcoin hat to caddy in for a few weeks, so that kind of
this will probably bring a few conversations.
Exactly, and it did.
So I've had quite a few calls from people over the last 6 months. So everyone says no one's called me yet. Like kind of the the bull market's coming when people start calling. So I have a couple.
Yeah.
But I think just asking people around about anything to do with money and understanding how it works and even understanding what inflation is. I think it just made me realize how many people they really do rely on third party to manage all their finances and for them to understand enough it takes some serious curiosity and some time to go against your third party advisor, who most of them still quite haven't figured out that the things that they've invested in for the last 40, 50 years might be changing. It's quite, you really have to understand it pretty well to go against the advice of someone like that, who you're basically put in charge of your finance. So that's the same everywhere, really. I mean, if we got rid of all financial advisors, I think Bitcoin would be a lot higher already, because those are sort of they still have career risk in advising something, even though they shouldn't do, but they do. We have the same. We have a person that helps us with some finance stuff, and yeah, we've had to defy their advice so many times to buy what we wanted to buy. Yeah,
it sounds like what you're saying is we are still so early.
Yeah,
yes.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, there's a handful of people probably that have the tiniest little bit of Bitcoin, but if they understood it, they wouldn't be a tiny bit. So there's adoption, I have some, and then there's adoption I have as much as I probably will have once I understand it. So there's a scale of how many people, and there's a scale of how much too. It's like a 3D scale, not just cell phone adoption. Everyone gets a cell phone and then they're not going to buy a second one. Bitcoin's much more exponential than that. So yeah, we are very, very, very early, it feels like, especially when we're asking around.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, that's also brings us back to ultimately, Bitcoin Sports Network. Our company was not only created, we saw this need, for people to generally off the streets get more Bitcoin education. We're like, okay, sports are already things that people want to do. So somebody that's a little bit more hesitant, but specifically also looking at the pro players, because you hear these tabloid stories that are, when they go bad, they're all over the news, of these young players that made tons of money, and then all of a sudden, they go bankrupt and nobody knows how that happened, right? And so, for me personally speaking, I will say, growing up in Germany, I did not get any financial education in school. Here it's the same in the US. And so it's kind of like, if you haven't been taught it in your own home, that can't really be anybody held at fault, nor should money be something that we ultimately need to learn, right? We always say in the Bitcoin community, if the money was sound, nobody would actually have to understand all the details of how the money works, because it would be sound, it would be a true store of value, where we can work today, put it aside, and know that it's worth more tomorrow than it was today, as it should be. And, me personally, I came out of the background of, I don't care about money, I just know that people make it, but I think it's subconsciously I always thought it was a big scam. And then when I finally was like, okay, fine, I will look at this, because there was always a pain point, I'm actually not surprised nowadays when I talk to people about Bitcoin, about finances, about money. I used to be on the other side of that, of so much avoidance, because ultimately it was a subject matter that I did not truly understand. And I would speak to, the female side of things. I think in our just environment, it is more suited for the guys of the family to be taught the financial aspects, and it's still like a very traditional role that we play as females. So, I just always want to give shout outs to like folks like Stacey Herbert, who's also part of the couple team, but, folks that are really, outspoken, speaking about Bitcoin, speaking about that this is a sound money, and really explaining the difference, from a female perspective too, of like, why does it matter, So, anyways, there was no question in that. So.
Yeah. Nice rant. Thank you very much for that.
But I think that's so good too, because it just gives, I think that's the majority of people, they don't have an understanding of money or finances. And it's sad to say, most people don't have much money to invest, and they feel like, okay, but I just live from day to day, and they don't even want to know or understand more. So coming, from that side, and then learning about Bitcoin, then it feels like you have a better understanding for the majority of people, and that can also help. It helps you in your journey to explain it to other people.
Absolutely. And yeah, I just also want to give a shout out to Natalie Burnell, actually, because, she was one of the ones that I started listening to her podcast like years and years ago now, and she's been so consistent with just the continuous education, having all these different guests on. And, sometimes she will have a guest on that still is like so over my head, I don't understand 50% of what's being talked about, but that's fine. I think, I always meet a lot of people, and I don't know if you guys come across these where they're like, oh, you're a Bitcoiner? Oh man, if I had invested like 10 years ago, then I would be rich now. But then you try to talk to them in the moment about, hey, we're still super young, like we're still super early, go and put like $50 a month into Bitcoin now, and it will actually be able to help your family in the long run. Like just $50, like don't spend it on coffee, like just go and put it. And they will just turn the other way, completely goes over their head.
Yeah, relating that to golf. When I was younger, I learned very early that I was never going to be as good enough to be a professional. Outside of, maybe winning a skins game or a long drive competition here or there. That was kind of, my own personal claim to fame. But I really felt like practice, people getting better at the game of golf, would make them better golfers on the course. And so I had a business idea of traveling around to all the golf courses and really doing a good job of documenting all the practice facilities that they had and the quality of the practice facility, and getting to know all of the coaches that were there and giving them access to people who were following the business to do online scheduling when online scheduling was a new piece of software. You know, it wasn't that long ago. We're still going through this internet adoption curve of new businesses that nobody ever thought about still being invented on the internet. And what I found was fairly quickly, people wanted to play golf, but people didn't want to practice golf. You know, they wanted to play well, but they almost had more fun complaining about how they didn't play well, or, you know, complaining how sore they were at the end of a round of golf, you know, not realizing that a good golf swing actually gives you energy. A bad golf swing just sucks it all away from you. And so on this educational part about Bitcoin, it's kind of the same way. Like, everybody wants to own Bitcoin, but nobody wants to understand why they own Bitcoin. And the why is why you realize why we're still so early into Bitcoin, and how $96,000, $100,000 Bitcoin is still very cheap considering all the assets that are out there and what this particular asset is trying to get to, or trying to take over, or how it's trying to help people. And I always think it's interesting. And one of the things that we want to focus on with Bitcoin Sports Network is, again, providing that platform for amateur and professional sports people to come together and talk about it, but then not just the sports people, but also their support team, you know, their accountant, their financial advisor, their real estate agent, you know, the people who help them figure out what to do with this money that's just going into a bank account, or investing in this 60-40 portfolio, or this great, you know, CD that'll lock your money up for a year, but it's going to give you 4.5% return, and how great that is. You know, and I feel like one of the challenges is, like with us, when you first start getting into it, you want to talk to somebody about it, but you're nervous about it. You know, you're self-conscious about it. It's like going up to another person on the PGA Tour in the middle of a round and being like, "Man, I'm really struggling out of the bunker. Can you give me a tip?" You know, like, probably not going to get that question, sort of deal. And I just feel like if the supporting groups of professionals had access to the right contacts in self-custody, what exchange to buy it from, how to store it, what's a good hardware wallet, what's a good, you know, a hot wallet, how do I do this, how do I do that, you know, where do I put it, kind of questions, I feel like the adoption would pick up, because people would become more comfortable with, now it's not just some company out there, you know, now it's a friend, now it's a person I know, now it's a support group.
Yeah, totally agree. And I mean, that is more than just golf, like we said, professional athletes in general, because once again, the athlete itself is so single-minded on what they're doing, and they have a lot of trust in the people around them. So, I mean, they are the ones that have the most influence on what these athletes do with their money. And yeah, like Frieda said earlier, we see too many stories of, you know, athletes that are bankrupt at age 30, and that just shouldn't have to happen. And most of the time that's from bad advice from the people around them.
Yeah. So question, when you get into the opportunity to potentially orange pill somebody, what are like the catchphrases, what are the first, you know, things that you bring to the table, and like, they must grab this or else, like,
how do you serve up your orange pill?
Yeah.
I mean, I've tried. I mean, there's so many ways to approach this. I've kind of gone for the simplicity, the most simple way to explain it. Because if you tell someone who's not interested to begin with, or not, who doesn't know anything, and you try a little too hard to explain too much at once, it lights out and you're done.
Yeah.
So I go for simplistic. Actually, one of my best friends, they're both a couple as well. They're from Germany too. He's very much, I mean, I would say he's probably the person that had the most success orange pilling. I remember the conversation. I actually explained it in a different way. I kind of thought of this way myself, because I didn't want to almost make it less financial. And I explained it as a database that anybody can add entries to globally without anybody messing with it. And it might, you know, it's going to be used. It might be used for, we don't know what exactly it's going to be used for, but it's that's what it is. It's the most simplistic thing I could give him to start with. And I actually picked his interest, and then I actually told him more exactly more detail. But yeah, sometimes when the sound money is what it is, but those words don't mean a lot to most people. They don't understand what it is. Like gold people do, but there's only, young people tend not to know much about gold either. So it's kind of picked a few different ways to explain it based on who we're talking to. Like people in the financial world, you can kind of tell them a little bit more, directly what it is. But I don't know. There's no one way actually that I've come across to speak to people about it.
Do you find yourself at any point in sort of a mentorial sort of, I don't know if that's a word, kind of a mentorship with younger people coming on tour? And, what kind of questions do they ask you as somebody who has such a large career in the LPGA, how they should think about their futures?
You don't really get so many financial
No,
questions.
unfortunately,
It doesn't
never.
have to be finance. I'm more.
But more the golf related ones. I mean, if it's girls that kind of are just turning professional, and I love having these conversations. I love being able to help the younger players, but it's a lot about. So most of the girls that turn professional have been playing college golf, so they have had everything taken care of by their college coach. So it's a lot to do with the scheduling, the travel, what to expect from being on the road for so many weeks in a row. So more those kind of things rather than, how to play a golf shot. That's they have their golf coaches. So it's more about life on tour, what to expect, how to handle the travel. Anything else that you kind of hear me?
No, it's usually just about the schedule change from college to pro golf. It's it's a drastic jump.
That was one of my biggest kind of learning curves when I turned professional. Was I felt like as an amateur golfer and in college, we played a tournament. If I didn't play good, I went back home, figure out what didn't go well, practice, got ready for the next event, and then I was ready to go. And then I came out on tour and I played 4 weeks in a row. So if it didn't work the first week, I didn't have time to, go home, practice, whatever. I needed to figure it out right there and then, because otherwise I was going to have another miscut the following week. So kind of just being able to, I guess, know your own game, know your own golf swing because your coach might not, most of the time, is not with you when you're out traveling. So being able to kind of get yourself out of that bad play a lot quicker. That was kind of the biggest learning curve, and that I've explained to a lot of younger girls too, because we were just never used to going from one event to the next before turning professional.
Cool.
And this is a last question I want to ask you, and I probably should have asked it at the beginning instead of at the end here. But we know how you caught your orange pill. How did you catch the bit or the golf bug? What got you into golf? Why golf?
For me, my parents played golf. Really, if I didn't come to the golf course with them in the summers, I wouldn't have been part of my family, I think. But I grew up in the northern part of Sweden, so at the same time, it was something we just did in the summers. And then skiing was my other sport, and they were the two perfect sports to combine growing up. And my dad was a good amateur golfer. It was, but my mom played a lot of golf too. And it was just something we did together as a family. So I probably had a club in my hand for the first time when I was about 3 years old. But I think my mom has told me that she had me out walking a golf course, or I wasn't walking, I was in a stroller. She was walking with me on a golf course when I was about 2 weeks old for the first time.
Wow.
Oh, wow. Very cool.
What about you, Daniel?
So when I was younger, my parents used to put me in for all different sports. So I used to do soccer, basketball, all kinds of ping pong, archery. I did sailing once, all kinds of different sports. And one summer they put me in for 10 golf lessons. Like it was a bunch of us, I think 10 or 15 kids. I think this was when I was about 10. So I did that. It was just on a driving range with, rock hard yellow balls off mats. And me and my brother both did that, and we both kind of picked it up. So my brother too, and I started playing golf from then onwards. And it was sort of combined with a few other sports at the start, and then in the end, it just got narrowed down to golf. So we both ended up on, with golf, coming to the US for golf. So yeah, it was really, I don't know if I liked it. I mean, I like all the sports I played. I don't know if I liked golf because I was good at it, or because it was just fun at that point. I'm not sure exactly why golf stuck, but once you get good at something, I guess you start to really enjoy it.
How old were you?
About 10 or 12.
10.
Yeah.
Cool.
Very cool.
Well,
Yeah.
you spoke of skiing being your other sport. So we're actually planning a ski event for 2026.
Oh,
so
sign up.
stay tuned on that. And then also our next event coming up this year will be April 3rd in Dallas, Texas. So we are going to be there the day prior to the BitBlock Boom conference starting. So if you guys are available, definitely come on out. I think those are my 2 shout outs. And then I wanted to see if you wanted to tell our audience anything that they might want to know about you, any websites, any way to find you, anything that's important to you, any life lessons.
I guess kind of to follow along, for me, the easiest is Pernilla Golf on Instagram. They're
Same on X too, no?
and same on X, exactly. And I am undecided how much golf I'm going to play this year. I'm looking to maybe take a step back after playing full time for 15 years. But I haven't really, I'm kind of letting my club stand in the corner at the moment to see how much I miss it or not. But Daniel will be out on the LPGA Tour caddying full time this season. So that will still keep me close enough to the game to see how much I miss it or not as well. But for any golf interested listeners, tune in to watch the LPGA Tour, because I always tell amateur golfers they can learn a lot more from watching the women's game. Our games are a lot more relatable, because when I say that I hit a 7-iron 155 yards, most amateurs can relate to that, versus the PGA Tour guys are incredible and so much fun to watch, but they're like superheroes. No one can actually relate to their games. So if they want to learn a bit more, tune in and watch the women's game.
Yeah, let us know, Pernilla. Are they cheating? Are they cheating on the PGA Tour? Because they hit that ball way.
That good.
You're so strong. Yes. Okay. Awesome.
And Daniel, what about you? How do people follow you if they're interested in who you're caddying for and any of your Bitcoin or
I always
golf
direct people, since it's golf related, I always direct people to Pernilla's account to follow, because I do a lot of her posts and things like that. But this year I'm caddying for an Australian girl, Gabby Ruffles, who she was a rookie last year on the LPGA Tour. So this is her first, she had her first full season, and then she's starting again this year. So she had a good start last year. I caddied one event at the very start of the year for her, and last week was the first event of the year with her, and then I leave tomorrow for a couple of weeks in Asia to continue. So I'll Pernilla, like Pernilla said, she'll come out to some events along the way, but yeah, I would direct anybody to Pernilla Golf as well. So
Okay.
it's kind of our journey together almost.
Very
Awesome.
cool. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. We really enjoyed talking with you. Happy Valentine's Day. I guess this is our sports couples episode.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we look forward to getting to know you more in the years to come and learning more about Bitcoin together.